Hey, folks, today's episode is brought to you by ZBiotics. I'm actually headed to Las Vegas for the Tort Conference.
Whoa.
And one of the things I pack is ZBiotics, which you can pack because actually they're small enough. They're under the 3 ounces. You can put it in your travel bag. Why? Because let's face it, I'm getting up there a little bit. After a night with drinks, I don't bounce back the next day like I used to. In fact, I'm not sure I ever did. But I got to make a choice. I can either have a fun night, a couple of drinks maybe, or I can have a great next day. But ZBiotics has made it possible for me to actually have my cake and eat it too. And not really cake.
Have your drinks and
exactly.
Drink them too.
ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to help you feel better the morning after drinking. And here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in your gut. And it's this byproduct, not dehydration, that is at fault for making your next day a rough one. ZBiotics produces an enzyme which helps break this product down. Just remember, all you got to do is you take the ZBiotics, you drink the little bottle this size, make it the first drink of the night, drink responsibly, obviously, and then all you got to do, feel great the next day. Every time I have a ZBiotics before drinking, it makes a huge difference. Allows me to maybe do my exercises, which I don't do regularly enough, but now I can't blame it on not feeling so great. Or, host let's say a podcast or YouTube show or anything for that matter. One bottle of ZBiotics is equal to the cost of one cocktail, but maybe half of one in New York City. But nothing beats the price of a great next day. Go to zbiotics.com/majority. Get 15% off your first order when you use majority at checkout. You can also sign up for a subscription using my code so you can stay prepared no matter the time or occasion. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. And now for that show that I had referenced earlier.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, April 1st, 2024. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, it's actually going to be a real one, folks, as opposed to the April Fools. Yanis Varoufakis, economics professor and former finance minister of Greece, author of Technofeudalism, What Killed Capitalism. Also on the program today, tens of thousands of folks protest Israeli government across 5 cities in Israel. No word on whether we are going to call them anti-Semites. Still awaiting. The U.S. sends more 2,000 pound bombs to Israel amidst billions of dollars worth of bombs and jets. Former Governor Larry Hogan pushed Baltimore ports welcoming ever-increasing size of cargo ships without in any way expanding promised safety measures. EPA announces new CAFE standards on heavy trucks in a bid to cut emissions by 2032. And the $20 minimum wage for fast food workers starts today in California. Biden wins the North Dakota primary. Connecticut, Delaware, New York, Rhode Island, Wisconsin. Federal primaries are tomorrow. Andy Kim's suit prevails. Federal judge says New Jersey ballots must be redesigned.
Good news.
And Florida, the latest state to dump hundreds of thousands of children off of Medicaid since the feds lifted a ban on booting supposed ineligible from its rolls. In a new report, kidney tests, racial bias denied thousands of black people kidney transplants. Remember critical race theory? All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is Monday.
Fun day.
Monday Fun Day, says Emma Vigeland.
Monday.
There is, I know, there's going to be some folks out there who are a little bit annoyed that we're not doing some type of April Fool's joke. Even as I say these words, it sounds like a setup for an April Fool's joke. But I'm headed off to the Tort Conference this year. It's all screwed up. The dates are messed up. This year it's early. Plus, we just had the anniversary show on Friday, so we had a lot of news to get to. And next year, when does April Fool's fall next year? Can we check on that?
Check the calendar, Bradley.
Bradley will be checking on the calendar, and I will decide right now as to whether we will, if it's on a Tuesday, and yes, we will have an April Fool's joke next year.
Boom.
So
We'll have a joke. Okay.
Yep. Well, you see, we're joking around, though. We're definitely acting like it's an April Fool's show. My daughter got me pretty good, but I'm not going to go into the details of that. But I was able to leverage that one and actually get just about everybody else in my life. So
Spreading it around.
Yep. All right, let's get into some other stuff here. Over the weekend, there were two reports that you should make sure that you see if we don't get into them too deeply. One was that the U.S. has sent a whole bunch. It's unclear how many billions of dollars worth of fighter jets and bombs we sent to Israel recently under what the State Department calls sort of like almost like a rolling authorization. These weapons were authorized sometime in the past. It's unclear from what State Department says, but these are just sort of like deliveries that, I don't know, maybe in the same way that we get we sign up for the water cooler and, 6 months later they're bringing us water. I mean, that's
automated subscription.
Automated subscription
to kill
weapons.
Palestinians.
But the, on top of all that, if that wasn't horrific enough, part of that, what was delivered were these 2,000-pound bombs that supposedly the U.S. was like, has told Israel and supposedly has a standing policy. These are not to be used in densely populated areas. And there is no greater densely populated area in the world than the Gaza Strip.
They've already used these 2,000-pound bombs.
They have many times.
Where were the hypothetical places they'd use this that weren't densely populated?
Then that gets into a question of if they can't be used in Gaza, where else will they be used? And then we're risking a wider regional conflict for our support.
I don't think there's any reason to believe that there's some restriction on them using them in Gaza. We haven't imposed that in the past.
Agreed. But the other scenario is horrific as well.
Of course. And the bottom line is that as densely populated as Gaza was 6 months ago, it is even more densely populated where people are, where these weapons would ostensibly be used. The other report is out of Haaretz, that Israel created kill zones. Now, some people are saying, oh, actually, this is a misinterpretation of the mistranslation of the Hebrew. It's actually extermination zones. Choose your poison in that instance. But the bottom line is that the this came out of the leaked video that we saw of the drone attacks on 4 boys who appeared to be, mid-teens, walking in the middle of a road, in no way looking as if they were trying to avoid anything, and were struck by a drone. And then, as 1 or 2 of them survived and tried to get away, struck again by another drone fire, I should say. And Haaretz went back and looked how this was classified as if they were Hamas militants. And there's absolutely no evidence they were Hamas militants. And it basically led to a broader story in the way that the Israeli military is operating. They basically decide there are certain perimeters, and it depends on which unit, from unit to unit, essentially, what the size of the perimeters are and what the terms of engagement are. And no one but those people who are killing other people know the details of these perimeters. And it puts into question all of the Israeli assessments as to who they've killed, and certainly how many they've killed. But that is something worth seeing in Haaretz. Meanwhile, on this weekend, on CNN's Christian Amanpour's show, here is Zahiro Shahar Moore, whose uncle is held hostage in Gaza. And this is his perspective on what the Israeli government has been doing.
You told us before we started the interview that some hostage families are hesitant to actually go out and protest. Why is that?
There is a very strong notion of, please don't make too much noise, otherwise your family member, your hostage, could be moved to a lower place once a list will be composed. There's a lot of pressure coming from the cabinet ministers stating these thoughts. Okay, be quiet, play along. Come with us to these delegations and then meet with the UN and put pressure on outside players, but don't say anything to contradict the official governmental line. And the Israeli public is being pumped with together we will win, and we're not winning at all. So this charade should stop. We need some international intervention, because the way things are going in Israel now, we're jumping straight head down to the abyss.
And it is really horrible to hear you describe that, and we obviously wish you all the best. So here
you have a Israeli family member of a hostage victim taken by Hamas, calling for international intervention with the way that Israel is reacting and the way they are going about supposedly attempting to secure the release of these hostages. And just less than 48 hours later, after that hostage relative is interviewed on CNN, we have images of tens of thousands of protesters in 5 cities around Israel, including Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, Haifa, Caesarea. What was the 5th one? I can't remember exactly what it was. But nevertheless, these are massive anti-government protests. And this is not to say that these people are protesting necessarily waging war on Gaza. But at the very least, they are unhappy with both the current Israeli government's failures that allowed October 7th to happen, and they are unhappy with the response.
The de facto, basically Hannibal directive response here.
Here is some images of those protests. You can see Israeli riot police.
As soon as we can do it,
All right, go ahead. You can keep.
we call for new elections to take place. Bibi Netanyahu is not doing his job anywhere in the last few years. He's bringing the country down in every aspect possible. So we got to replace him immediately.
Okay. And I mean, it's hard to not see those images and think that had they taken place in this country, we would hear all sorts of commentary in basically every corner of the media of the rampant anti-Semitism that is taking place, and the out of control college students or whatever it is, and TikTok, et cetera, et cetera. I'd be curious as to sort of some of the folks like Dan Goldman and Congressman Dan Goldman, but ranging from, I don't know, the editorial board at the New York Times, whomever, as to their response to this.
The whole range of people has been failed by Biden, and like all the range of Democrats and supporters of Israel in this moment. Not only like the far left and Ofer Kasif and those folks, but the literal families of the hostages.
Yep.
They're being failed by this support of a genocide instead.
All right, we'll have more to talk about this later in the program. And in a moment, we're going to be talking to Yanis Varoufakis, economics professor, of course, and former finance minister of Greece, author of Technofeudalism, What Killed Capitalism. But speaking of which, we've got a couple of sponsors for today's program. This one was a sponsor that I used before they actually became a sponsor. So I'm always happy about stuff like this. FastGrowingTrees.com is the biggest online nursery in the U.S. with more than 10,000 different kinds of plants and over 2 million happy customers in the U.S. Were you ever aware of that?
Was I?
Yeah.
No, I was not aware of the number, but I would not be surprised given how highly you've spoken about Fast
Well,
Growing
all right,
Trees.
fair enough. They have everything you possibly want. They have fruit trees. They have nut trees. They have palm trees. They have evergreens. And they have a ton of house plants. They also got like shrubbery and like, tall grasses. I don't know what those are called. Tall grasses? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you're interested in. They have it for you. You can find the perfect fit for your climate and for your space. Depends on what growing zone you're in if you're going to do it outdoors. I'm happy to be growing zone 5. And of course, it's getting closer to 6 because of climate change. Yeah, sorry about that. Fast Growing Trees makes it easy to order online, and your plants are shipped directly to your door in 1 to 2 days. And along with their 30-day Alive and Thrive guarantee, they offer free plant consultation forever, which is very helpful. You call up, my tree's got yellow leaves, or have I planted it correctly? What should I put on there? The answer is compost. Nevertheless, I have Korean pear trees. I have apple trees from them. The bloomerang, which is a lilac that comes back and blooms twice, spring and then like in July. It's a tiny like little tree. It's really cute. You can do it inside too.
I like the name.
Yep. You don't have to have a yard or a lot of space. You can grow a lemon or an avocado tree or an olive tree or fig trees inside your home. On top of course, a wide variety of houseplants that are available. They got experts at Fast Growing Trees that curate thousands of plants so you can find the perfect fit for your specific climate, location, and needs. You go to your big box store, you got about 3 different trees to choose from. You got very few house plants to choose from. Even if you go to a nursery, it's going to be take you forever, and they just don't have the stock that Fast Growing Trees has. It doesn't matter if you're looking to add some privacy or shade or natural beauty to your yard. Fast Growing Trees has in-house experts ready to help you make the right selection with growing and care advice available, again, 24/7. You can talk to a plant expert about your soil type. You can talk to them about your landscape design or how to take care of your plants. Everything else you need, you do not need a green thumb. Not required. This spring, they have the best deals online, up to half on select plants and other deals. Listeners to our show get an additional 15% off their first purchase when they use the code majority at checkout. That's an additional 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com using the code majority at checkout, fastgrowingtrees.com. Code is majority. The offer is valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions may apply. Also, today's sponsor, honestly, I am happy about this product. Well, every third day. I don't shave every day. And even when I do, it's just here and here and right here and right here. But no more nicks, no more cuts, no more waste, no more plastic, no more subscriptions. That's why you're going to want one of these Henson shavers. Henson Shaving is a family-owned aerospace parts manufacturer. They've made parts for the International Space Station. They've made parts for the Mars rover. They are supposedly like the one outfit that people would go to when other manufacturers didn't want to make that part. And then they decided to use their computer numerical control machines. I can never remember that. To create a razor. And the big challenge for them was, how do we get the razor, which is like a diving board, to not hang out too far from the razor, the shaver itself. The longer the board, the more wobble. And then the more wobble, the more nicks, the more cuts, the more scrapes you get. A bad shave turns out to be not a blade problem, but an extension problem. Well, Henson makes these metal razors that extend just 0.0013 inches, less than the thickness of a human hair, then extend out from the blade. Plus, they also have these like little tracks here where you can evacuate the shaving cream and stuff like that. But secure blade, stable blade, great shave. And here's the thing about Henson razors. They're Canadian. And why do I say that? Because only Canadians would start a business like this today, which is they set out to make the best razor possible, but not necessarily the best razor business. In other words, there are no subscriptions. There's no proprietary blades. There's no planned obsolescence. I will have this until you pry it out of my cold dead hands. Because once you buy a Henson shaver, and they've got a couple of different models, but they're all more or less like this. They feel great. They look beautiful. I got a black version as well. The blades cost about $3 to $5 a year to replace because they use those non-proprietary, sort of like old-timey dual edge razor blades. And so no subscriptions, no obsolescence. This is a razor that will last you a lifetime. It's a great gift. And here's the thing. Right now, they're giving you the razor blades for free. Visit hensonshaving.com/majority. You pick the razor you want. Use the code majority. You'll get 2 years worth of blades for free with your razor. You just got to add them into the shopping cart, and then it'll get reduced after you put in the coupon code. So that's 100 free blades when you head to Henson Shaving, HENSONSHAVING.com/majority. Use the code majority. The great gift, honestly, because you don't have to, like, you buy it once, they're set for the rest of their lives. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to Yanis Varoufakis, economics professor and former finance minister of Greece, author of Technofeudalism, What Killed Capitalism. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Joining us now, Yanis Varoufakis. He is an economics professor and former finance minister of Greece, author of Technofeudalism, What Killed Capitalism. Yanis, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start. Well, we should say that your book is a sort of a dialogue, if you will, between you and your father in many respects, who about the question of like what era are we in, or are we still in an era of capitalism? But before we get there, and you offer a little bit of history for this, let's go back to feudalism for a moment so that we can enter this conversation where everybody has sort of a good understanding of the basic terms. When we talk about feudalism, we're talking like the shift from feudalism in the, I guess, the 17th and 18th centuries, more or less. Tell us what was feudalism and how did capitalism sort of like replace it, or to what extent did it replace it, at least in that era?
It's a question of who had the power to make people do things for them. So under feudalism, it was the landowners. If you owned large tracts of land, you also controlled the peasants living on them. Effectively, you owned them, not individually, but collectively. And land ownership, therefore, allowed you to watch them produce wheat, barley, corn, whatever it is that they were producing. And then at the end of the harvest, send the sheriff, who, by the way, was your right-hand man, if you were the landlord, the lord, the baron, the earl, whatever. And the sheriff would collect 50, 60%, which was your share. So you can see that the production was happening. There was an economy. Of course, there was an economy. But there were no markets. There was no labor market. There was no wage. People worked. There was labor, but there was no labor market. There was just a residual. And the power of the landowner was the capacity to use property rights over the land and labor in order to collect a rent, a substantial rent, 40, 50, 60% of the harvest. So the essence of feudalism is land. Land ownership begets power to extract a rent. Whereas capitalism, the moment we shifted to capitalism, power came not from owning the land so much. I mean, of course, there was power from owning the land, even today, real estate markets, for instance, right? In Miami or wherever. But under capitalism, it's the ownership of the machinery, of the steam engines, the locomotives, the electrical grids, today the industrial robots. So capital goods, produced means of production, machines that we've created in order to build stuff or make stuff, manufacture stuff. And anyone who owns that, the capitalist, extracts not rents, but profits. The difference between the sale price and the cost of production. My hypothesis is that in the last 10 years, without even noticing it, we shifted to a new system. I'm not saying we've gone back to feudalism, but we've gone to a system which is ahead of capitalism, but has many of the characteristics of feudalism, in the sense that if you own Amazon.com, if you're Jeff Bezos, right?
All right, hold on. Let me, before we get into this, I just want to go back to just point out a couple more features of feudalism, if you'll indulge me. What inhibited I mean, this may seem somewhat rudimentary, but what inhibited the peasants working on Sam's Duke of wherever land from getting up and moving? I mean, what was it simply just like the difficulty of the lack of mobility at that time, and what captured them on this land that there was no market for their labor?
Really very simple. Their head would part their shoulders very quickly if they dared say, I'm quitting, I'm leaving. There was no such concept of quitting and leaving. Their heads would be chopped off. It's really very simple. Brute force is the answer to your question. It's a very simplistic, you don't need economic theory for that.
I mean, but it's an important, I think, like a measure to note, because I mean, ultimately, when we talk about like sort of that.
What I think you will find interesting is how were they liberated from those bonds? And that is really very interesting. And the answer is sheep liberated humans from the bonds that they had with the land. What I mean by this is that once navigation and shipping became more advanced, and a ship owner could start a journey in Southampton, fill up the vessel with wool, right? which came from the back of the sheep, and transport it to India, and then swap it for silk, which we didn't have in Europe, and take it to Japan and get beautiful, wonderful swords that the samurai, and then bring back the silk and the samurai swords in Southampton. If they made the trip all the way back, right? Suddenly they had a huge arbitrage, huge profit. Okay, so suddenly landowners realized that these filthy merchants and ship owners, right, were making a lot more money than they had. And so suddenly, economic power from political power was separated. And they started competing with them. If you can't beat them, you join them. So they replaced the peasants. They chucked them off their land. It's what historians refer to as the enclosures. They got rid of the peasants using their brute force, not to keep them in the land, but to get rid of them and to create big fences, the enclosures, to keep them out and to replace them with sheep so as to participate in the international trade of wool. And suddenly you have a working class, because the expelled peasants knocked on the doors of nearby villages, which blew up and became the cities. And they said, I will do anything for a loaf of bread. That's the first labor market. The first attempts for someone to sell their labor for a wage. And that's how capitalism started.
Fair enough. All right, great. And so let's jump ahead to this new era, which you call techno-feudalism, where there is a similar dynamic. The trajectory is going in a different way.
There are huge differences. There are similarities, but also huge differences. Let me put it this way: the moment you type into your laptop or your iPad or your phone, Amazon.com, and you get in there and you want to buy an electric bicycle or a pair of binoculars or whatever, a book, right? My contention, and I know that sounds really very strange, is that you've left capitalism, you left the market, because Amazon looks like a market, but is not a market. Because if you and I walk into a shopping mall or a farmer's market, right, there is a huge degree of decentralization. There are lots of buyers, a lot of sellers. We talk to them directly. There is no one in go-between us and the market and the seller, the shop, right? We can talk to one another. Whereas the moment you and I go into Amazon.com separately, you on your laptop, me on mine, right? And let's say we type the same thing, electric bicycle. You'll get a completely different list to the one I get, because the algorithm knows you perfectly well, knows all your previous history, and knows my history, and not just through Amazon, but through Facebook, through Google, because they share this in data, right? And you and I cannot talk to one another. We cannot talk to the vendor. And in a sense, it's a bit like a digital fiefdom. I call it a cloud fiefdom, or cloud fief, in which there are traders and consumers and users. And the capitalist who sells the electric bicycle to you or to me is charged a rent, something similar to the ground rent of the Lord. 40%, up to 40% is what Amazon retains. So the profit, the capitalist profit, is shifted to the account of Jeff Bezos. Now, what is Jeff Bezos selling? He's not selling the electric bicycle. He owns the digital fief in which we're all caught, just like in old feudal times. So this is the similarity. Of course, the difference is that he wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth like the Lord or the Earl or the Baron was. He's a capitalist in the sense that he had to invest huge quantities of what I call cloud capital in order to create this new form of rent. And that changes everything. I think this is a huge game changer. This is why I don't think we should refer to this as capitalism anymore. I know it's a very striking and it sounds very radical, but a hypothesis. But I do believe there is a very strong case for that, because we need to reconfigure our own understanding of how everything works. The macroeconomy, the money system, international trade. Why is there a huge clash between the United States and China today? I don't buy the story about Taiwan, about the military engagements and so on. For me, it's got to do with the fact that the United States and China are the only countries in the world that have developed this all singing, all dancing new form of capital, which I call cloud capital, which, unlike steam engines and industrial robots, is a produced means of behavioral modification, which creates the techno thieves that endow the owners of that cloud capital with an immense power to extract rents, not profits.
What were the mechanisms of enclosure here? I mean, we've spoken a lot about intellectual property and the beginning of the internet, where there was the possibility for more decentralization and open source technology, but then it quickly kind of got funneled into the hands of these very few capitalists that you speak about. How did we get to this point?
Emma, I'm old enough to remember using the internet before it was called the internet, and it was a capitalism-free zone. It was not just decentralized, but it was a gift exchange, real. To this day, if you want to visit a URL, you use the HTTP :/ program. This was created by somebody. I don't even know who this person was. I don't remember the name of this person, who actually gave it away to the community of the internet users for free. Didn't get a single penny. SMTP, which we still use to send emails, was a free program, a program produced by a member of the community. So the internet was a commons. And then the enclosures came. Now, what was it? It's not intellectual property for me. You know what it is? It is the fact that, unlike the analog world, in the digital world, on the internet, you do not own your digital identity. When you're walking around the United States or Europe, wherever, you have a passport that your government has issued and which allows you to prove who you are, or a driver's license that your state has issued, right? So, you can prove who you are. But on the internet, you cannot. As I was waiting to join you, for instance, to join the particular interface with which we are speaking now, the program that you asked me to click onto, the link, said to me, join with Google, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, right? So I had, and you do too, whenever we're on the internet, we have to beg some conglomerate to testify to who we are. And usually it's a bank as well, because it's through your credit card or debit card that you have to prove who you are. That, in combination with the applications, the App Store that Steve Jobs initiated, creates these cloud thieves. So, for instance, why can't you, let's say that you want to go to the airport. Why isn't there a public app provided by the municipality, wherever it is that you live? You register and you say, my name is Emma and I want to go to the airport. Who wants to take me? And let anybody who wants to bid for your business do it. Well, you can't do it because you can't prove who you are. The only way you can prove who you are is by going into the Lyft app or the Uber app. And that creates the enclosure. So that's the answer to your question.
But can't I do that with with Curb? I'm unclear on that element of it, because that's what the passport does, right? And the passport also proves who I am, but in real life. My driver's license, right? Or no?
The passport is not owned by some corporation that can extract funds from you in order to use it. It's owned by the federal government. You pay a certain sum, you get it, you have it for 10 years, end of story. Nobody charges you rents for use of that passport. If only you had something similar on the internet, the world would be quite different. Yeah.
In other words, we can't exist on the internet without having given up something to establish our verification. In some instances, like X or Twitter now, you actually literally have to pay. But in any other, even when you enter into this thing, I've got to give my data to Google to establish that I can go through there. There's always a cost associated with it, as opposed to, here's my driver's license, I can get into a bar and I'm not getting charged necessarily because the government issues that verification.
Exactly the same thing, slightly differently. You need to volunteer to become a cloud serf, a cloud peasant of some corporation, of some cloud list, owner of cloud capital. Because the moment you get into Google, into Facebook, into all that, you are enriching the cloud capital of that corporation. Because, just having Google switched on, Google Maps, Google knows where I am. It knows how fast I'm moving. So it enriches the cloud capital of Google Maps, because then you can use it in order to find out whether, which roads are congested and which roads are not congested. So essentially, all of us, voluntarily, maybe it doesn't matter whether we like it, we may even absolutely love it. I'm I'm an enthusiast for all these things, right? I'm not a Luddite. If you take this phone away from me, you will be my worst enemy. I love TikTok, all that. But that doesn't stop me from realizing or making the point that these are cloud thieves which extract gigantic quantities of rent, which should worry us all. It's not a moral point. It's not that they take away my data or they know stuff about me. I don't care about what they know about me. I know the NSA knows everything about me. What I care about is who owns the cloud capital that allows them to extract, my estimation is around 30 to 35% of global GDP. It's been siphoned off. And you see the difference is, think about it. Take General Electric or Lockheed or Ford Motor Company or General Motors or Volkswagen. The big old monopoly capitalist megaliths. Now, 85% of their revenues goes to salaries and wages, including the salaries of the top-notch directors and so on. 85%. Do you know what percentage of Facebook's revenues go to their salaries and wages, Bill? Less than 1%. So the money is taken away from the circular flow of income. Now, that's why the Fed in your country, the European Central Bank here in Europe, they're absolutely petrified. They are damned if they reduce the money supply, the money printing, because all this money is being extracted from the circular flow of income, and they are damned if they don't because of inflation. So this is why, today to be a central banker is to be somebody who never sleeps at night. And we should worry about that because the quality of investment and the quality of jobs is constantly diminishing because the circular flow of income is constantly losing energy, value to these owners of cloud capital. And the result is we're not capable of investing in the things that would determine the future of humanity, like green energy, like, education, even straightforward capitalist goods whose production now is not particularly profitable when Mr. Bezos extracts 30-40% of the price that you and I pay for them.
So this is a story of ultimately too of massive beyond wealth inequality that would have been reminiscent of the feudal era, where the duke or the king would control an enormous amount of the wealth, and this is obviously. All that wealth is just sort of like sidelined, and you're saying that the central banks have this need to run the printing presses to fill that gap so that your average person can actually have some money that exists. So I want to
just the inflationary pressures happening, which increases the cost of living crisis, which has other ill effects. So there is a ripple effect of ill effects.
There's an analogy in our Social Security system in this country, insofar as we used to traditionally capture about 91% of income in this country would touch payroll taxes, and now it's down to about 86-85% because so much of it is above the cap in which we collect this money that it's being basically hoarded by, not literally a handful, but pretty close, relatively speaking, of people. But all right,
very few people, Sam. Very few people. Even if you look at the New York Stock Exchange, which is doing really very well. But why is it doing really well? Because of the cloud capital owners, the Magnificent Seven. If you exclude NVIDIA, which produces the microchips to drive the cloud capital, the rest are. Their high share values are a result of amassing this cloud rent. The rest, if you take those seven away from the rest of the New York Stock Exchange, American capitalism is not doing well.
How walk us through the timeline of how we got here over the past couple of decades, because obviously it starts with this idea that, and I guess maybe there is a counter narrative where sometime in the late 80s, early 90s, Al Gore sits on a commission and says, we're going to basically have an authentication, a government-sponsored authentication verification thing. Like your driver's license, your passport, your TSA, whatever it is, you get it we're going to charge a one-time $35 fee or $10 fee or whatever it is, the way that we do with a license. And boom, you are Sam Seder on the web in any construct. You don't need to use, and even at that time, I don't think we had this idea where you could enter into people's spaces, but you didn't have like a terms of service that would only allow you to enter spaces without one of these. That did not happen at that time. And so, but what happened over the past 25 or so years that got us to where we are now?
I think one is exactly that point, the point about the digital identity, which I made before and you very kindly repeated. But there is also another development, which I find it very difficult to believe that we could have handled it. Well, we could have handled it different, but it's a huge event. The great financial collapse of 2008. Because come to think of it, completely independently of the internet, completely independently of digital identities and all that, 20 years of financialization for separate reasons led to the collapse of Wall Street. And the collapse of Wall Street led to the collapse of the British banks in the City of London and the German and the French banks and the never-ending crisis of the European Union. So the West, the North Atlantic economies went into a huge spasm. In April of 2009, after Obama took over, there was a meeting in London in April 2009 between the presidents, the prime ministers, and the central bankers of the G7. And they decided, in their infinite wisdom, to solve the problem by means of a combination of what I call, this is my term, right? Socialism for the bankers. They printed $35 trillion to give to the bankers. $35 trillion together, all of them, the G7 together, from 2009 to last year. 35 trillion is a considerable sum, right? While at the same time, to compensate supposedly for this largesse, they practiced austerity on the majority of our populations. Even the Obama administration, the stimulus was not really a stimulus, as we very well know now, because if you add the federal government stimulus to the state retrenchment, the net effect in the United States was austerity. And here in Europe, here in Greece, we were the world champion, record holders of austerity, right? In Britain and so on. So you have, North America and Europe, including Britain, austerity for the many, low levels of demand, lots of money in the financial circuits. This combination of huge liquidity in the financial circuits and low levels of demand, what it meant was that, when the, Bank of America people or the Citi people or the, Société Générale Bank in France picked up the phone and called an industrialist, either General Motors or even Apple and so on. And they said, I've got, 500 million here that I just printed. Would you like it? I just received it from the central bank. Would you like it? Now, these industrialists would look out of the window and see little people, impecunious, little people with very little money to buy high-end, high-value-added stuff, right? So they said, well, I don't want this money. I'm not going to invest. The people out there don't have what it takes in order to purchase high-end products. But the banker was insistent because the banker's nightmare is to have money that the central bank gives them that they don't pass on.
Because they want that money to go to work for them and be making more money, essentially.
So they would say to them, they would say to the industrialists, look, take it, I'll give it to you for free, 0 interest rate. Because they were getting it at negative interest rate from the central bank. So, even that was a good deal for the banker. So in the end, General Motors and Volkswagen got the money because it was free, but they didn't invest it. They took it to the stock exchange and they bought back their own shares because that's how they kept their share prices high and therefore their bonuses high because the directors' bonuses are linked to the share price. Okay, the only capitalists who invested in actual capital were the owners of cloud capital, the Zuckerbergs, the Bezoses, the Musks, and so on. And this is in my book, this is the story I tell. So there is an inexorable force that buffets world capitalism, at least North Atlantic capitalism, which is the force of financialization that gives rise to Lehman Brothers and then the collapse and then everything I've just been describing, which creates $36 trillion for capitalists to invest. But then there is austerity and the lack of a digital identity that identifies each one of us, which allows them to colonize and privatize the internet at the same time as this period of almost 2 decades, during which the state has given them trillions to invest in this cloud capital. And that is, for me, the beginnings of technofeudalism.
And to what extent, I mean, so this is the monetary policy ends up providing the fuel for this. And there is no government, the fiscal policy, I guess, is the austerity, which also sort of like almost like creates the path in which this money is going to flow downhill, essentially. And it's like a Porchenko game that half of it's been like blocked off on some level. But was there also an opportunity at this time? I mean, Obama could have said, instead of giving money to the banks, we're going to give the money to the homeowners first. They can pay off the banks and also expend the money. But that would have been a program of that had nothing to do with austerity at that point. It would have been a very different program in terms of where the money would cycle through. We wouldn't have the housing crunch, et cetera, that we have today. But was there also an opportunity? Was this a perfect storm because we also are living, or at least had been living, in a regulatory era of where antitrust was completely obliterated? In other words, were we living in an era of antitrust like we have now, and that was in 2008 or 2000 for that matter, or never had changed? Would that have perhaps changed this ability for Amazon to be the marketplace, essentially, or all of these entities having the ability to corner verification and just becoming, like, to use would that have been the sheep sort of era for us, where we could have moved a little bit more, I guess, as a cloud surfs, we could have moved around a little bit more?
I think we're on the same page. So let me take those two strands of your presentation question. The first, it was a deregulation of the Clinton era, which on the one hand unleashed the financial genie from the bottle, with Wall Street going berserk, with the CDOs, the CDSs, the CDO squares and all, which led to the collapse in 2008, which then led to the 35 trillion. So that's one. And the ideology in neoliberalism that the market knows best, and therefore you don't need antitrust, you don't need regulation. The state is always at fault when it tries to double guess the market. That was part of the crime against logic at the time in the 1990s. But then I have to say that Barack Obama, even though he's a very nice man, I've met him personally, he's lovely. Nevertheless, I think he's going to go down in history as responsible for, amongst other things, the malice of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Because for exactly the same reasons as you put it. Why on earth did he save the bankers? The banks had to be saved because the banks are they're like the arteries of the capitalist system. If they are severed, then the whole thing goes, pear-shaped like it did in 1929. But why save the bankers? Why refloat the derivatives market with the Geithner-Summers plan? Do you remember the Geithner-Summers plan?
Yes.
That was a crime against logic.
We're going to foam the runway, essentially.
And it was just a spectacular example of socialism for the worst criminals of the financial sector. Okay? And Obama oversaw this. And that created a discontent, which then led later on to Donald Trump being able to talk about, draining the swamp and all that rubbish, which of course he never did because he took the same people from Wall Street and put them in the Treasury.
Right.
So yeah, we are on the same page. It was the irrational exuberance of the late 1980s. Wall Street, the movie by Oliver Stone captured that quite nicely, but also the 1990s deregulatory craze. And it was just a complete craze. It was just really unscrupulous people commanding political power in Washington, but also not only in Washington. It started also a bit earlier in London, in Berlin, in Paris, in Athens, here in Greece. And they just went berserk, letting these people effectively create their own ATM in their own living room or office, printing money, private money, and placing bets. And those bets at some point came tumbling down. And when that happened, they practiced austerity on the many and socialism of the few again. And there's no conspiracy. The beauty of this is that there's no conspiracy. None of them knew that the result would be what I call technofeudalism. None of them. I'm not claiming that they knew, that they had an intention. They had no idea. I didn't have any idea. It's just that, that's how history works. Right. History is the result of unintended consequences of various choices that we make, or to be more precise, that those with the power to usurp our democracies make.
I would agree with that. I guess I would nitpick and say the consequences, they got the consequences they wanted. There were other unintended consequences, but it was pay us the money. And that is the most important thing. The Michael Frohmans, the Geithners, the Rubins, all of those folks basically said, if you save the banks, you save everybody. But we're not as worried about the everybody. You just got to trust us on that. They all got their money. They short of maybe, I guess, Bear Stearns, they all got their money. Maybe Lehman Brothers. But as a class, they all got their money, and then they turned around and made more of that money through the sort of now our techno overlords, as it were. And if we're in an era now where it's not, capitalism isn't done, but there is the relationship between this sort of techno-feudalism, as you call it, and capitalism is, akin to moving into a different era. How do we escape that? What is the mechanisms in which we undercut that? Is there an opportunity to say, we're going to have a public option for Google so that you can have verification? When you get on our ping, there'll be the government sponsored version. And is it antitrust? What are the ways to address this?
Well, we need a new deal for the cloud capital era, for the techno-feudal era. And that new deal, just like the original deal, New Deal by FDR, had many different policies as part of the same project of restoring balance and restoring some power for the many. The same thing. So there's not one magic bullet. You need many magic bullets. So, for instance, here's some examples. You mentioned one. The digital identity story, which we already have addressed. But also, once you have that, then you have the possibility of having algorithms that are municipally owned. So, for instance, imagine that instead of having Uber, you can have, a cooperative taxi drivers who have their own algorithm, which can be provided by the local public library that also has, coders working for them in the form of an open source community. And, there are so many talented people out there who would love to do this, to participate in this, as long as there is an attempt like FDR's New Deal to provide them with some basic resources and some of the institutional support and legislative support they need in order to defend themselves from the Ubers and the Airbnbs of the world. That's one thing. But also imagine that you have a cloud tax. So in order to save bookshops, bricks and mortars and physical bookshops, that you have a cloud tax for transactions of books, of other things on Amazon.com or other cloud capital-based platforms above a certain level of overall revenue, imagine that there's a 5%, 4% tax, cloud tax. Indonesia has it. Turkey has it. It's not even a novelty. And that creates a comparative advantage for local companies using maybe algorithms or, cooperatives or tax tribes or bookshops of, farmers markets, as opposed to Walmart, which is becoming a huge cloud thief in its own sense, in its own right. And then I would go further, of course, and I do in the penultimate chapter, in which I say, well, look, it is time that we understood that we're all cloud serfs of these large corporations. And as I said before, we are contributing to their capital, but we're not getting any dividends. We're not getting any ownership rights over the capital that we contribute. So how could we address that? Well, here is an idea, a very simple idea. Bill Gates once proposed a robot tax. I think this is a silly idea because it's impossible to define the robot. What is a robot and what isn't a robot, right? But imagine saying to Google or to Facebook or to any large company, you know what? Because we are all producing your cloud capital, if you want to operate in the United States, the European Union, we could have, the United States and the European Union to give us ourselves more leverage. If you want to operate in our realm, you will have to deposit 20% of your shares in a sovereign wealth fund. And the dividends accumulate, and those dividends become a basic income for everyone. Not through taxation, because if you tell blue-collar workers that you're going to tax them in order to provide others with the basic income, you lose them. But if you say to them, look, you should be the owner of part of that cloud capital, which you help produce. And because it is impossible to know who has produced which bit of capital, let's have joint ownership of the 20% of the shares of those companies, and let's all share a basic income, whether we are rich, poor, nice, nasty, white, black, Trumpists or Bidenists. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad that you. Sorry, Yanis. You can keep going.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
No.
Yeah, I'm just so glad that you mentioned the fact that it's a very unique industry in the sense that we're contributing both to the product itself by using the app or using Twitter or using Facebook, and then also contributing, and then we're getting the product back in return in the form of consumption of social media. But the social media is becoming less and less of social media at this point, right? We're getting less and less in return. It's all going towards the cloud. So what happens when social media essentially breaks down and these social media companies become what they really intended to be at the beginning, which is the capture of people's data so that they can sell it and enclose it? Because I think we are reaching somewhat of a breaking point, at least on some of these bigger apps like Instagram and Twitter. They're kind of reaching their end goal of what they initially wanted, right? Enclosing people's data.
Well, two ideas here. One is, how about having a bill of digital rights, which allows you to sue them if they use your data without paying you? That would be a game changer. And imagine a second idea that you, in the same way that, remember back in the early years of mobile telephony, of cell phones, when you had a Verizon number, and then you wanted to change and go from Verizon to AT&T, you couldn't transfer your number. And then the state came in and imposed interoperability, that your right to transfer your number from one to the other. Now, I am on Twitter, right? I've got more than 1 million followers. If I go to Blue Sky because of my disagreement with the way Twitter is behaving these days, let's say, hypothetically, right? I will just lose 1 million followers. I will not be able to communicate with them. And that is it's not Twitter's technology that keeps me with X, as it's called now. It's the fact that it is a cloud thief. It belongs to a man who does whatever he wants with me because I will lose 1 million followers if I leave. Well, imagine if we say that if you want to operate, then you will have to allow me to communicate with my followers on Twitter, even if I leave Twitter. I can take them with me. Or if I go to Blue Sky, let's say, and I post something there, that they should receive it on Twitter as well. in exactly the same way that the state forced cell phone companies to allow you to go from one to another without penalty. Now, these are part of the New Deal for the techno-feudal era. As I said, there are many different magic bullets, and I just mentioned a few.
Why not use and I like the idea of either you got to contribute 20% to a sovereign fund. It could be that could be imposed in numerous different ways. For every user you have, every user hour, you got to pay this amount in a tax, for instance, or something like that. And maybe it's a UBI, maybe it's we could use some health insurance over here too, might be good. I mean, whatever it is in that regard. But why allow these things to exist in the form that they're in? Because one of the things that seems sort of like problematic to me, or what attracts me to the idea of like using antitrust is that if you allow them to still, even if they're only amassing 80% of what they're amassing right now, they're still the only player in town. And if their ability to control a fiefdom, even if it's where they've got to pay a vig, essentially, they still retain a lot of power in which going forward maybe undercuts the ability of the regulatory regime. It ebbs and flows and whatnot. I mean, why would that be better than just basically saying, we're gonna outlaw your algorithm, and we're just not going to allow you to be that big, or you're not allowed to be able to sell exclusively these books or these products, or I mean, there's a myriad of ways, it seems to me, to inhibit and undercut the growth and cut these companies up so that they don't amass the power that allows them to be this dominant, even if they're giving some kicking back X percentage of dollars. But just from a pure democracy standpoint.
Well, you're speaking to my heart. There's no doubt about that. But let me say that it's not straightforward to take the antitrust legislation of the 1920s under Theodore Roosevelt and apply it to these companies. Because, when Roosevelt, the first, the Teddy Roosevelt, when he broke up Standard Oil, it was straightforward. Technically, it was really very simple. Politically, it was very hard. And, kudos to him for doing it. But technically, it was really very straightforward. But all he did was to say, okay, every state's Standard Oil is a separate company. Now you can compete with one another. But how can you do this with Facebook? Or, when you go to Facebook, you want to find all your friends in one place. Supposedly, you don't want to have Facebook for California and another for Arizona, and a Chinese wall between them. That wouldn't work. Twitter, the same. But I have two thoughts on this. Firstly, that if you introduced a Bill of Digital Rights, which allowed people to sue companies that actually use your data in order to condition you to buy stuff, all you will need is a class action for their business model to collapse, without being illiberal and saying, I'm going to ban you. Because I'm as a lefty, I'm feeling uncomfortable about the state coming in and banning a company. I want to change the property rights so as to take away the power from them in a way which is clearly fair and therefore can amass mass support, politically speaking. Otherwise, it won't work. But, in a previous book, which was a science fiction novel of mine called Another Now, I described my ideal world in which every company, not just cloud capital-based ones, but every company operates on the basis of one employee, one share, one vote. And then imagine if you were to legislate, change corporate law so that you have one person, one share. So the share, the idea of the share becomes like that of an ID card for a college student. You can't sell it, you can't buy it, you can't rent it, you can't lease it. You have it as long as you are registered at the university, at the college, and where you're gone, you go. And you can use it in order to vote in elections, to use the facilities and so on and so forth. Imagine if you had that kind of system. Suddenly the share market would go, and suddenly every company would be a cooperative. But of course, that's why, as I said, I included this in my previous book.
Science fiction.
Political science fiction. But it's important to imagine realistic utopias in order to know which direction of change we want. Because the idea of taking 20% of the shares of these companies and putting it in a social welfare fund, well, if you increase this from 20% to 30% to 40%, then eventually the limiting case is a Star Trek liberal communism.
Right. No, I would subscribe to that as well. And I guess I wasn't saying ban, directly, but rather to do what you're talking about, legislate certain things that really undermine the business model as they stand now. So you could have, it just wouldn't be worth their while to operate in the fashion that it does if they're not able to scrape our data and exploit it in the way that they do, or algorithms that feed us stuff in the way that it does. It seems to me from an antitrust
data and allows you to take your data away from their platforms, not lose it if you cancel your subscription or your username. That is important.
All right, last question. I appreciate your staying with us this long. What if we're at this juncture now? I know that if maybe I asked you 20 years ago, would we be at this juncture now? You would have no idea. But how does this mutate in your mind? Like, where does it, increasingly, does our GDP reflect the part of, is there an expansion of this techno-feudalism, or does it still need the underlying capitalism on some level to exist and it reaches some type of equilibrium? Or is there a third iteration that rears its head? I mean, assuming we don't go into a direction that is more socialism, like, where does this iteration of post-capitalism, for lack of a better term, head towards?
I think both of what you said are compatible with one another. The first is that, yes, without the capitalist sector embedded in the technofeudalism that I'm referring to, technofeudalism doesn't work. In the same way that the feudal sector is still important to the extent that we need to eat food, right? So you still need the ranches and large crops in order to feed us under capitalism. Similarly, the capitalist sector is essential for the techno-feudal lords, the cloudalists, to skim off the rent. But I think that indeed the capitalist sector will shrink and shrink and shrink in terms of its capacity to invest. That will create more and more macroeconomic crisis at the level of not just our society, but the West, generally speaking. This is going to intensify the tension between the United States and China, because China has a completely different model. They are far more capable, because of their authoritarianism, to regulate the extent to which there is investment in things that they want, like solar panels. They can produce as many solar panels as they want these days, compared to Americans or Europeans, who can produce almost next to nothing compared to our needs. So we are moving towards greater instability, and I'm going to have to put on my, greeny ecological hat to say that as this process continues, with the cloud capital of the algorithm, of the social media that Emma referred to before, being primed to toxify our democracies, our conversations, in order to maximize the accumulation rate of cloud capital in social media, our capacity to agree on what needs to be done in order to stop the climate catastrophe is going to diminish. It's already diminished. We cannot have a proper conversation because the way in which the social media algorithms are primed to poison democracy, the conversation between us. We are, as a species, we're going to prove very idiotic, and we will not succeed in arresting this very steady decline of our environment.
To be
that's
fair,
why politics, and that's why democratic politics is more essential now than ever.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, to be fair, social media did not the resistance to even the existence of climate change, at least in this country, certainly predates social media. We had an entire party dedicated to the proposition.
Of course. But the social media model of cloud capital accumulation is such that it is impossible to have a conversation anymore. And that is, this is manna from heaven for Donald Trump and the Republican Party that really doesn't want us to have this conversation.
Yeah. Yanis Varoufakis, the book is Technofeudalism, What Killed Capitalism. We will put a link to that at majority.fm and our YouTube and podcast descriptions. Maybe we'll put it out on social media a couple of times too. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate it too. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right, folks. That is it for this part of the program. Going to head into the fun half of the show. Just a couple of programming notes. First off, oh gosh, sorry. Let me just take a sip from the 20th anniversary mug I have here. I don't know if you can see the logo there. The lighting makes it a little bit tricky, but it really is classy. Pop up the T-shirt. And we have it in gray. We have it in black. Beautiful T-shirt. We have also hats and mugs, all with that 20th anniversary logo. It is 20 years for the Majority Report. Actually, now it's 20 years in a day. So this whole year we're celebrating. I mean, technically speaking, the 20th year just ended.
Wow.
We're actually entering into our 21st year, but we're going to be celebrating the 20th years. And if people have an issue with that, I don't know what to tell you.
You should have had it.
I don't know what to tell you.
20 plus year end. It should have.
I don't know what to tell you. Go find some other show that's been on for 20 years. But you can buy some of these merch, and soon we're working on the book.
What show has been around that long? Has Democracy Now?
Oh, Democracy Now has been around for 30 or 40 years, I think, at this point. Yeah.
I feel like mid-90s.
Well into the early 90s, I think, or early 90s, I think it was happening.
Yeah. Hartman, I don't know.
Much bigger. Hartman was definitely been around. He was pre-Air America. Not by much, though. Randy Rhoads was pre-Air America. Hey, Ron says, Sam, you and the MR crew normally ask really good questions, but I was disappointed you didn't ask Yanis how to pronounce euro, because I knew. I'm not going to ask a question I didn't know. Euro.
Euro?
Not euro. I'm talking about a euro sandwich.
Oh.
Like a gyro.
Oh.
You slice off the lamb off of
That's
a round
confusing
thing.
because I would have not assumed.
I thought you meant the
I grew up in
currency.
Worcester, Massachusetts, and there's a significant Greek population in the Rhodolacuses were my neighbors. So
wow.
Yep. It's one of the few things I know how to pronounce. Anyways, the point being, you can support this program at jointhemajorityreport.com. Be a part of our next 20 years. We're doing this in 20-year segments. That's it. That's the way we've decided to slice it up. Become a sustaining member. Jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, justcoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Nope. Fair trade coffee or hot chocolate. And you can get the Majority Report blend. Of course, you can get that WTF blend from that dude, Mark Maron, who came on the show the other day. Whatever. But use the coupon code Majority, get 10% off. Also, just a programming note. I will not be on the program tomorrow because I will be in transit to Las Vegas. I'm going to do one day of this year of the Tort Conference and then come back. I have my kids this week, and so things got mixed up, and it's going to be a little shorter than normally, which is good too for my blackjack habit. Which
yes,
is not.
You're going to be broadcasting live from the Las Vegas Sphere.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm going to be in the conference room this time, in the booth area.
Oh, you went to the Sphere last time. I forgot. Right?
I did go to the Sphere last time. I'm not going to go this time. I found a thing terrifying. That thing looks like a huge fire hazard to me.
They are doing the NHL draft there. I know that because apparently the Rangers owner and Knicks owner, James Dolan, didn't want the Rangers to trade their first-round draft pick. So in his stadium, they're like could be an announcement for the player, because that's how normal sports owners run their team. But I'm worried about everybody in that sphere thing, because I've heard it's super steep. Like,
it's incredibly steep.
Like the guys have to get up and go to the stage when they get selected in the draft. I'm like, someone's gonna fall off and break their neck.
I am convinced that someone has already gotten seriously injured there.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know this for a fact. I'm speculating. But
I seem like old people have difficulty getting up to their seats.
I'm never mind getting up to your seats. Like, I was afraid to stand up. It's dark and you can drink in there. Like,
oh, of course,
forget about it.
You can drink in Vegas.
But I'm saying, like, in this
I
thing,
know.
it's like this is like a ropes course, and
I'm scared enough at like Madison Square Garden. I'm going to tip off the edge.
I would honestly. I was like, this. I don't understand how this is gonna. This is not like a lawsuit.
What did you see there?
Just some like I think
nature doc.
Yeah, I didn't.
Classic.
I wasn't going to spend a ton of money on it. To be honest with you, but I wanted to see it out. I was there. Yeah, I was like, what's the? It was some guy handing out things. It was like he had two hands. One was like a strip club, and one was like a reduced sphere. I was like, I'll take that reduced sphere thing. But that was that. So there you have it. Well, I'll be there on Wednesday, and then I'll be back on Friday as well. Emma.
On ESPN today, we'll talk a bit about the People's Champs, NC State, LSU and Iowa rematching in the women's tournament tonight, the Jonte Porter betting probe, what it means for the colossal tidal wave of scandal that's probably coming to all professional sports as it relates to gambling.
I'm sure that's the only time that's going to be a problem.
It's going to be a huge problem. There's going to need to be massive regulation, but everyone's getting rich right now, so they don't seem to care. And then also we'll do a little bit of an NBA playoff preview talk. The West is just stacked once again. Some Eastern teams falling apart, but Joel Embiid is set to make his return, I think, in a few days. So youtube.com/ESPN show.
Matt!
David Griscom and I, her patrons, talked about these Apocalypse 6x6 cars that you can buy for like $250,000.
Wait, what?
Interested in, preparing for the apocalypse. You getting one of these
Apocalypse?
Apocalypse 6x6. I'm surprised you haven't heard about it, but yeah, you can.
I am surprised.
It's basically like really. They take like trucks and put way too big of engines in and pretend like they're bulletproof, but they're not. Anyway, we also talked about Don Jr. being a bow hunter, which I don't really believe. Or at least
clip.
Do
we have that
it,
still?
But it's like the gentrification of hunting before our eyes, as it becomes like what it is in Europe, just a rich boy sort of getaway.
Sorry, not to cut you off, but but I will. But like Don Jr. he has that photo with the lion, right? That he slayed, or the rhinoceros.
Exactly, and I mean, to be fair, like rich New Yorkers have done that since Teddy Roosevelt, at least. Go to Africa and do safaris. But anyway. So Patreon.com/LeftWorking. Tomorrow, Matt Huber. We're talking about degrowth and Saito's work on Marx.
Quick break. Fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Oh, no! Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare! Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Denner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males...
Psych. Fuck them. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what? A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the